Okay, good morning. This is a course last semester. We took the first part of the course last semester, and this is the second part. For last semester, we stopped at the Renaissance. We looked at the classical period, we looked at the medieval period, and then we looked at the Renaissance, or the Elizabethan period. And so since this course is a continuation of the first part, that means we'll proceed from the Renaissance and we'll look at the Restoration period, which is subsumed in the Neoclassical period, right? Look at the Neoclassical period. The Neoclassical period is large and contains a number of sub-eras, like the Restoration period, which begins the age, and the Augustan period, the age of Pope. But we also have the age of Dryden, age of Pope, Augustan period. The age goes by many names. And then we will also look at the next age, which is the Romantic period. Look at the Romantic period. And after that, we'll also look at the Victorian period. I think that's where we're going to stop. Okay? So let us just text talk of the eras that we have in English literature up to where we are, so that you know the progress we've made. Normally what we do is we look at the character of the era, what we call the zeitgeist, right? What we call the zeitgeist of the time. By zeitgeist, we mean the spirit of the time, the character of the age, the ethos of the period. And after that, we look at the literature of the period that bears the character of the period, or how the spirit of the age is reflected in the literature of the time. That is the course. It's as simple as that. Okay? So when you say the Neoclassical period, you'll be like, what are the major features of the period that stand it apart from other periods? And we begin to mention them. After that, we now say, what are the important literary texts in the period? And how do they reflect the spirit of that period? It's a very simple course, right? Very simple. That's how it is. So even when you're answering questions, that's how you're supposed to do. You ask questions on the Romantic period, you state the spirit of the age, and you see how that is supported in literature. Okay? So we had the classical period. We had the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages. Then we had the Renaissance. We had the classical period. We had the Middle Ages. Then we had the Renaissance. We had the Renaissance. You can also call it the Elizabethan period. The Renaissance is actually a large term. Okay? And the Renaissance is between 1500 to 1600 or so. But, you know, these temporal marks are fluid. Okay? So there's really no hard lines with the ages. They're just things that help us demarcate the ages. And then after the Renaissance, you have the Neoclassical period, which is what we want to do. Want to start with this. Want to start this course with. Want to start this course with the Neoclassical period. The Neoclassical period spans 1660 to 1785. Some people could say 1600 to 1785. That is the Neoclassical period, 1660 to 1785. Or you could say 1600 to 1785. After the Neoclassical period, what you have is the Romantic period. The Romantic period. The Romantic period. Okay? Which spans 1785 and 1832. 1832. When the Victorian period begins. Some scholars say that the Victorian period begins in 1835, some 1832, so depends on the scholar. So the Victorian period is next. The Victorian period is next. Victorian period spans 1832 to 1901, when Queen Victoria died. Victorian period spans 1832 to 1901, when the Queen Victoria died. Then after that, you have the modern period. The modern period. The modern period, which could be studied as one Edwardian period. Edwardian period, from Edward. You have Edwardian period from 1901 to 1910. In fact, most scholars agree that modernism, or the modern period, actually began in 1910. Okay? But again, it's a matter of opinion. So, Edwardian period is for about 9 years, 1901 to 1910. Then you have the Georgian period, from George. You have Georgian. That is Georgian, the Georgian period. Spans 1910 to 1936. 1936. 1936. So, all of this period is the modern period up to the late 20th century, because from 1900 you are already in the 20th century. Up to the late 20th century. So you have the postmodern period beginning from the middle of the 20th century, like the 1950s. The postmodern period. The postmodern period begins from the middle of the 20th century, at the 1950s upward, till today, in the postmodern period. We are in the postmodern period. But we have new critics who are saying that we have a new age after the postmodern period. We have new critics who have come out to say that we have a new age after the postmodern period, and they call it the postmodern period. The postmodern period. So the postmodern period began in the 1980s. the postmodern period. I am one of the critics who believe that we have a new age apart from that exceeds postmodern period, and we call it the postmodern period, and it spans from the 1980s to today, all right, as we speak, because of the changes that has been brought to the world, to reality, to literature, owing to the existence of sophisticated technologies. So we have new realities now that we never knew before 1980. All right? And because of that, we have the post-modern period. So that is the human ages, human history as we know it, but we have to go back to the Neoclassical period, which is where our lesson on ELS 242, Survey of English Literature, begins. All right? So you will recall that the conflict noted in Renaissance history and literature between the crown, between the Catholic and the Parliament and the Puritans, respectively, culminated in the English Civil War. Culminated in the English Civil War. Remember that the conflict was religio-political or politico-religious. The conflict that we observed in the Renaissance was largely politico-religious or religio-political. I mean, it has to do with a mixture of religion and politics, as could be seen in the conflict between the Catholics and the Puritans, or how would you call them now? The Protestants, okay? The Catholics and the Protestants. So that whenever a Catholic king or queen was on the throne, the Catholics will rejoice and the Protestants will be oppressed. And whenever a Protestant king was on the throne, the Protestants will rejoice and the Catholics will be oppressed. Okay? So this conflict built and culminated in the English Civil War. The English Civil War lasted between 1642 and 1651. But it could be further than that because the actual war was fought for 9 years. But the problems that built up to the war and all the conflicts could be said to have lasted for not less than 20 years. Okay? So the English Civil War lasted between 1642 and 1651 for 9 years. It led to the defeat of the royalty, defeat of the crown, led to the defeat of the royalty, the defeat of the crown, and the beheading of Charles I. And the beheading of Charles I. And the beheading of Charles I. During this time, we had what was called the English interregnum. The English interregnum. We had what was called the English interregnum. Interregnum is spelled INTERREGNUM, the English interregnum. It refers to a period in English history when there was no monarch ruling the land. A period in English history when there was no monarch ruling. This period began on the 30th of January, 1649. This period began on the 30th of January, 1649, when Charles I was executed. When Charles I was executed. And lasted till the 29th of May, and lasted till the 29th of May, 1660, when Charles II, the son of Charles I, returned to England to become king. Lasted till the 30th of January, or 29th of May. Lasted till the 29th of May, 1660, when Charles II, the son of Charles I, returned to England to be crowned king after so many years that the people of England spent without a monarch. Now, it should be noted that the return of Charles II to the English throne, we noted that the return of Charles II to the English throne is what has been termed the Restoration. The return of Charles II to the English throne is what has been termed the Restoration. So the Restoration period begins or is marked by the restoration of Charles II to the throne as a monarch after years of the English interregnum. The years during the English interregnum is usually considered a historical wilderness. The years during the English interregnum is usually considered a historical wilderness as far as literary production and growth is concerned. As far as literary production and growth is concerned. It was not only a historical wilderness because the English people did not have their king. It was also a historical wilderness because virtually everything cultural stood still. Virtually everything cultural stood still. Because virtually everything cultural came to a standstill. And this is owing to the character of the people who ruled at this time. This is owing to the character of the people who ruled at this time. They were known as the Puritans. They were known as the Puritans. The Puritans were a religious sect under the Protestant movement. The Puritans were a religious sect under the Protestant movement, but they were more religious and more righteous than the other Protestants. They saw themselves as the cream of the crop. If the Protestants had a righteous cause, the Puritans were the most righteous, or at least they saw themselves so. So they were the holiest of the holiest, and they detested anything that was sinful or considered sinful or immoral. And so in their rule under Oliver Cromwell, in the Puritan rule under Oliver Cromwell, in the Puritan rule under Oliver Cromwell, Cromwell is spelled Cromwell. Cromwell. Let me take that again. Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell is spelled Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell. And later, under his son, Richard Cromwell. Their reign was characterized by the need to purge society of all manners of immorality and sin. To return society to the moment of moral rectitude and sanctity. So no sinful act was tolerated. So their activities affected literature and literary production. The activities affected literature and literary production. For instance, the theaters were closed down. So for the years when the Puritans were on the throne, you did not have theaters where people go to see plays, or where new plays could be rehearsed and acted, because the plays were seen to be immoral, because they did not glorify God. The theaters, a place where immorality used to thrive, as far as the Puritans were concerned, were closed down. So it is why I said that literally all forms of cultural production, like literature, was not allowed. Which is why I call it, this period, a period of historical wilderness for literature and other forms of cultural production. So you could see that the people were happy to finally have a relief when there was a settlement for Charles II to return to the throne. And the reign of the Puritans And of course, another way of defining the Puritan is a person who is happy when you are sad and sad when you are happy. Okay? So, and the reign of the Puritans come to an end. When you smile, the Puritans wonders what is making you smile in this bad world. Okay? What could make you laugh in a world so full of evil. Okay? So the restoration of Charles II brought about significant changes in the English society, beginning from 1660. The restoration of Charles II brought about significant changes in the English society, beginning from 1660. Charles will have a long reign full of peace. And of course, where there is peace, there is development. Charles will have a long reign full of stability, regulated by stability and peace. And a society that has peace can easily develop, because peace and development do correlate. So not only was monarchy restored to England, there followed other forms of restoration. So the restoration was not only literal, it was also metaphoric, it was also figurative. Restoration was not only literal, it was metaphoric and figurative. Peace was restored to the English society after a long time of war. The theaters were reopened. The theaters were reopened, and everyone can be happy again. So what you need to understand is that political circumstances usually have impact on cultural production in any given society. By political circumstances, I mean the political terrain, the political disposition, the disposition of the political leaders to literature or to issues that affect cultural production. By cultural production, I refer to literature, other forms of arts. Charles II himself was a patron of the arts and artists. Charles II himself was a patron of the arts and artists. Charles II himself was a patron of the arts and artists. He encouraged writers and artists Charles II himself was also a theater goer. Charles II himself was also a theater goer. And he likes his plays. He likes his plays bawdy. He likes his plays bawdy. Right? B-A-W-D-Y. He likes his plays to be bawdy. Right? So he likes the lusty and the bawdy plays. He was a fun-loving king. Charles II was a fun-loving king. Charles II was a fun-loving king and a patron of the arts. So this explains why literature thrived in the Restoration period. And it provides the right conditions for the flourishing, provides the right conditions for the flourishing of literature in the Neoclassical period. Provides the right conditions for the flourishing of literature in the Neoclassical period. Charles II was not only a patron of the arts, he also chartered the Royal Society. He also chartered the Royal Society. He also chartered the Royal Society. A body of scientists committed today to the improvement of scientific knowledge. As I chartered the Royal Society. So the short name is the Royal Society. The long name is the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge. The long name is the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge. The Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge. So this body was made up of all intellectuals in London at the time, including writers and scientists. Guys like Dryden and Pope were members of the Royal Society. By natural knowledge, we are referring to scientific knowledge. It's natural science. So let us spend some time to look at what we mean by the Neoclassical period and its character. We have seen how the Restoration period gave impetus to the achievements that will be marked by, or that will be marked in, or that will be made in the Neoclassical period. So what is the Neoclassical period? We will begin our definition of the neoclassical period by examining the morphological structuring of the word neoclassical. It has two morphemes. The word neoclassical has two morphemes, neo and classical. It has two morphemes, neo and classical. Where neo, N-E-O, means new, N-E-W. It could also mean like, so in that way, we can say that the neoclassical period means the new classical period, or like the classical period, or after the classical period, or following the classical period. And God is so kind that in the first part of the course, we looked at the classical period itself, so our energy is reserved. Leave the class. So you will recall that the classical period refers to the period of the Greeks and the Romans. The classical period refers to the period of the Greeks and the Romans, specifically in the 5th century BC, 5th and the 4th centuries BC. Usually considered the golden age because of its striving for perfection in almost all fields of human endeavor, so that the later ages drew inspiration from the classical period, including the Renaissance and the neoclassical period in English history. So that the later ages drew inspiration from the classical period, like the Renaissance and now the neoclassical period. We should remember that the Renaissance precedes the neoclassical period. The Renaissance was in the 1500s. The Renaissance was in the 1500s. The neoclassical period that we are talking about now began in 1660. So what we are trying to say is that the English people from 1660 saw themselves, likened themselves to the classical period, because there were certain historical correlates. Because there were certain historical correlates between the two periods, between the two ages. That is why the neoclassical period is also called Augustan Age, named after Augustus Caesar, named after the age of Augustus Caesar. In the Roman era, whose age was exactly the same as the English period that we are talking about. Whose age is exactly the same as the English period that we are talking about. For instance, Augustus Caesar came to the throne after many years of internal war. After many years of internal war, of civil war. And his age also enjoyed a long period of peace. So one of the names that the neoclassical period goes by is the Augustan age, because the English people likened that time to the age of Augustus Caesar. One of the names given to the neoclassical period is the Augustan age, because the English people saw themselves in the same situation as the Romans during the age of Augustus Caesar. So this is why we have the term neoclassical, like the classical period. So as stated, the neoclassical period spans 1660 to 1785. And in it, you have sub-eras and ages. Some of them marked by the important writers, whom we are going to study in the course of the course. All right? We'll study them in the course of the course. The neoclassical period, therefore, was a time when the English intellectuals looked to the classical period for inspiration. Especially in the arts. Time when the English intellectuals and writers looked to the classical period for inspiration, especially in the arts. After the instability of the war years, the writers believed that modeling their lives after the ancients could bring about the much needed stability and peace. So in the life and art, they wanted to be the best. They wanted to be like Homer. They wanted to be like Virgil. They wanted to be like Ovid. They wanted to be like Horace. And other Greek and Roman writers whom they imitated. So neoclassical period implies the imitation of Greek and Roman writers by English writers of the 18th century. English writers of the 18th century. They did not only borrow art forms from these classical writers. I've mentioned some of them: Homer, Virgil, Ovid, Horace. They not only borrow art forms from these ancient writers and their works, they also modified these art forms to suit the conditions of the time. They also modified these art forms to suit the conditions of the time, the needs, the requirements of the time. English writers did not only borrow art forms from ancient writers, they also did what? Modified, altered, and modified these art forms to suit their needs and the requirements of the society. One of the characteristics of the neoclassical period is that it coincided with the Industrial Revolution. Coincided with the Industrial Revolution, the expansion of the English Empire coincided with the Industrial Revolution, the expansion of the English Empire, and the development of machines for industries. The development of machines for industries. The neoclassical period can also be called a scientific age or the age of science because of these scientific developments. It is said that the people, because of the development of machines, the people tended to behave like these machines. People tended to behave like the machines. The people tended to behave like the machines. Why was that so? That was so because this age was regulated by rules and regulations, social rules and regulations. This age was regulated by social rules and regulations. There were rules to regulate all aspects of life in society. There were rules to regulate all aspects of life in society. Including courtship and marriage. And to break these rules, to break any of these rules, could spell doom for the individual because it could make the individual a social outcast. Because it could make the individual a social outcast. It could make the individual a social outcast. However, staying faithful to all these rules also predispose the individual to being hypocritical and artificial, or to being artificial and hypocritical. Also, however, keeping to all these rules could predispose the individual to being what? Artificial. The individual could come off as artificial, machine-like, and hypocritical. Especially where you have to smile when you have to cry. And so the smile will come off as fake. Because we know that based on the context of events, you are supposed to cry, but the social situation stipulates that you should smile. And so you smile like a crocodile. Okay? You smile like what? A crocodile. And the smile will be fake, will not be real, will not be genuine. Because you are simply keeping to the dictates of society. Because the rule says, don't cry in public. Whatever happens in public, smile, because everything is fine. All right? And then this horrible thing happens in public that you are supposed to normally cry, and you smile. And you can imagine how that kind of smile looks like. Okay? So it makes people look artificial and hypocritical. And the writers of the time decided to satirize this kind of behavior noticed among members of society in that time. The writers of the time decided to do what? Mock this kind of social pretension noticed among the English people of the time. The writers of the time decided that they must hold this action to scrutiny. And the best tool they could use for this was satire. The best tool they could use for this was what? Satire. And what is satire? Emma's destiny. What is satire? So satire is a work of art that ridicules human foibles in order to correct them, right? Satire is a work of art that ridicules human weaknesses, human foibles, in order to do what? To correct them. Good. So satire mocks human weaknesses. So satire was a major art form in the Neoclassical period. If you want to talk about Neoclassical literature, you are talking about satire. It was the age when satire flourished. The age when satire flourished. So you can call the neoclassical period the age of satire, and you won't be wrong. You can call the neoclassical period the age of satire, and you won't be wrong. You can call the neoclassical period the age of satire, you won't be wrong. Because their major art form was satire. And why did they use satire? Because they noticed something off with the people of the time. They were living artificial and pretentious lives. They were living artificial and pretentious lives. Now, this satire came in the form of mock epic. This satire came in the form of mock epic. The satire came in the form of mock epic. Mock epic. Mock epic. Faith Young, what is mock epic? Okay. So we had said that the neoclassical writers went back to the classical period to borrow forms, to borrow art forms, right? So the art form that they actually borrowed was the epic. But they did not use the epic in the same way the Greeks and the Roman writers did. Rather, they modified the form to suit the situation in that time. And that resulted in the mock epic, a long narrative poem that has all the features of the epic, except that it treats trivial subject matter. It treats trivial subject matter, light subject matter, unserious subject matter. The mock epic is just like the epic. It is lengthy, it makes use of grand language, grand style, but then it treats on serious subject matter. It treats on serious subject matter. And the result is what? Laughter. The result is laughter. The result is humor, fun. The result is satire. When you use a grand language to talk about something so insignificant, the result is satire. And so you could see that most of the works that we will study in the neoclassical period literature are satires of various forms. It's the age of satire, satires of various forms. And we will discuss these satires as we go on the course. So these mock epics were also called mock heroic epics. mock heroic epics. These mock epics were also called mock heroic epics. Mock heroic epics. Do you know why they were called mock heroic epics? Because of their style. Because of their style. As they were written in heroic couplets. 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 Heroic couplets. A couplet is a two-line stanza poem. A two-line stanza poem with a rhyme scheme. They are called heroic couplets when they are written in iambic pentameter. They are called heroic couplets. They are called heroic couplets when they are written in what? In iambic pentameter. Excuse me, please do not forget that. They are called heroic couplets when they are written in iambic pentameter. Iambic means that the stress distribution in the line is unstressed. And pentameter means that it has 5 feet. That's 10 syllables per line. Iambic means unstressed in the pattern of syllabic distribution. A stressed and unstressed pattern of the lines is unstressed. That means you have an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable in that order till the end of the line. Pentameter means that it occurs 5 times. Each pair of unstressed stressed syllable occurs 5 times, giving you 10 syllables. That makes it iambic pentameter. And then the lines rhyme. That's heroic couplet. This was the literature of the time, the art form of the time, the poetic form of the time. So, we are going to end the class there for today. When we meet again, we'll proceed with the Restoration literature and its politics. Good morning.